Hello, my name is Rafael Seiz Ortiz from Universitat Politécnica de Valencia, and in this technical English unit I'm going to deal with modal verbs. Modal verbs are very important because they add a specific meaning to the so-called main verb, and it's very important to know the rules and the meaning that they add to the main verb. Regarding the contents of this presentation, we're going to start with the form of the most important modal verbs in English, and also we will have a look at the examples of use of these modal verbs. The objectives are simple: to learn the correct form of modal verbs and also to learn how to use them correctly with examples, and to classify them or classify their meaning in pairs or in groups of verbs. Regarding the form of modal verbs, in the affirmative they are followed by an infinitive without to normally. For example, he must write the answers here, and you don't have an s in the third person. In the negative, the negative particle not is placed after the modal. For example, you should not or shouldn't eat much at night. And in question form, they normally go without the auxiliary do. Should they be connected in series? We have to say before we move on that modal verbs always come in combination with main verbs. The modal verb is the verb that adds this specific meaning to the main verb. We are going to have a look at the most important types, forms of modal verbs. Here we have must and have to. Must and have to, in the meaning of obligation, they are synonyms in the affirmative, but they are very different in the negative, as we will see in these examples. Must in the affirmative can have the meaning of obligation or possibility. As an obligation, we can have you must wear gloves. It's an obligation, a rule. Whereas in the possibility meaning, we have the following example: it's dark, so it must be late. Must not implies a prohibition. For example, you must not park on the yellow lines. You are not allowed. So it's a prohibition. Have to in the affirmative has also the meaning of obligation, the same as must. For example, you have to eat less fatty meat. Whereas in the negative, it has a completely different meaning from a mustn't. Do not have to means that something is not necessary. In this example, you will see it clearly. You do not have to apply for a visa to travel to France. There's no necessity. The next group of modal verbs are can, may, and should. Can and may, again, in the affirmative are synonyms, or nearly synonyms. They imply either a possibility or a permission of the main verb. For example, I can drive a lorry, it's possible. Or can I come in? In this case, we are expressing a permission. Whereas cannot in the negative implies impossibility to carry out an action. In this example, I have broken my arms, so I cannot lift objects. It's impossible for me to lift objects. Whereas may not in the negative is not, again, it's not synonym of cannot in the negative. May not in the negative implies uncertainty, not impossibility, but uncertainty. In the example, he may not come to the meeting, but we are not sure. And should is another typical modal verb, and in this case, the added meaning to the main verb is advice, as you can see in this example. You should talk to your wife about the business idea. Here we have a little summary of the most important added meanings that modal verbs give to the main verbs. We have in this slide we have the different meanings and the different possibilities that we have regarding modal verbs. To express necessity or obligation, we have the following verbs: must, have to, need to, have got to. Regarding recommendation or advice, we have should or ought to. Ought to is a complex modal verb we didn't see, but it means nearly the same as should. With the meaning of ability or possibility to do something, we have can, be able to, be capable to, or have the ability to. Expressing a high probability we can use the verbs must or have to. And to express probability, we have may, might, can, or could. It depends on formal or informal language, but also on the circumstances, because modal verbs depend very much on the context, because they add meanings that depend very much on the circumstances in which we are speaking, and also they add information to the main verbs. And it's important to note that the verb, the complex verb, be able to, is used as an equivalent, is the synonym to can, in the cases where we don't have a verb form of the verb can, in infinitive, the plural, etc. Here we have two examples. Tomorrow I will not be able to drive, or they want to be able to attend. There's a typical mistake in English language learners to use a can with an infinitive form. It doesn't have an infinitive form or plural form. So, well, no, infinitive. In these cases, we have to use be able to, as in the examples. So, in conclusion, it is very important to use the correct form of the modal verbs depending on circumstances and the context that we said. And modal verb, because modal verbs depend very much on the circumstances and the situation. It's important depending on the meaning we want to add to the main verb. And it's very important to study modal verbs in pairs or groups of related verbs, as we did here. Here we related can and may in the affirmative or negative. This is important when we want to actually organize the meanings that they add in a logical way. Thank you very much.